Hello, everybody. It's Tyler with 3D Printing Basics. If you guys were interested in getting every single episode of this podcast, 3D Printing Basics, ad-free and a week early, and also getting exclusive perks such as exclusive episodes that only you can listen to and more, then subscribe on Patreon. My link will be down below. I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider supporting me. All the support I've already received has meant the world to me, so thank you guys so much. If not, no worries. Continue to consume these episodes for free, and I appreciate you listening regardless. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 105, and in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about a common occurrence in 3D printing, and that is why your prints or your file settings, even if they have worked before, they might not work anymore. We have all kind of ran into this before, I'm sure. I know I've ran into it. I know my 3D printing friends have run into it, is that you have a file that has been working great for a long time. You've got it tuned in, everything is working great. And then for some reason, you fire it up one day and it just doesn't work the same as it used to, whether there's some filament issues or whether it's the printer itself. It's something is gone awry, and even though you didn't change anything, it's not working as good as it used to be. So we're going to be talking about some reasons why that might be the case and some things to check out to make sure that you know all the basics there is to know about 3D printing. Before we get started, I also wanted to mention I created an Instagram for the podcast. It's just 3D Printing Basics. It's as simple as that. And if we get to when we get to 1,000 followers, I'm going to be giving away a 3D printer. So the link is in my show notes below, and make sure to follow the Instagram. And yeah, with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate all the support, and let's just jump right into it. So the big idea of this episode is that 3D printing is not static. It's not something that is going to stay the same over months, over years. It's going to be something that is consistently changing. Your 3D prints are not always going to turn out exactly the same. They depend on a lot of things, whether it's your environment, changes in the filament, changes in the brand, parts degrading over time. We're going to go over all of those things, but that's kind of the big idea that I wanted to hammer home with this episode. It's that 3D printing is not at all static. It is something that is constantly changing, and you need to make sure that you're changing your settings, changing your filament, changing your environment to kind of keep up with the changes, because if you kind of leave things to how they are and refuse to change them because things are working good, then it's going to catch up with you sooner or later. And especially if you're running a business like me, when it catches up with you, that costs you time, it costs you money, and that is definitely something that we don't want to do. So let's just kind of jump right into it. So the biggest reason why, if you have a file that's been working great and it might not work so great anymore, it's going to be environmental changes. The easiest explanation for that, or the easiest example of that, is just the seasons. You know, obviously with winter, it's colder. It's usually a little bit wetter, whether it's raining or snowing or wherever you are. That is going to change your 3D printing a lot, because the filament, even just normal PLA filament, it can absorb moisture, and then that can affect your prints very much. So you definitely want to make sure that you kind of keep that in mind, you know. And when you go to summer, it's obviously much hotter. It's usually a little bit drier, and that can definitely affect your print. So if you have a print that is running good in the wintertime, you have everything dialed in, your filament is nice, and everything is working great, you might find that 6 months later, when you try and do that same exact file in the summertime, when the temperature is drastically different. Well, actually, I don't want to say drastically different, because most of us have have our printers in a, not a like climate controlled like safe room, but usually they're in our own house. The temperature there is usually pretty consistent with heating and with the AC, so it's not like it's drastically different, but the outside elements, even when your printers are inside, it's going to affect it, so that's definitely something to consider. You know, if you print something that worked great in the wintertime, 6 months later, chances are you might have some issues in the summertime. So you want to make sure that you're consistently tuning your printer, and especially if you're running a lot of the same file over and over and over again, you want to make sure you have it tuned as each season, or as you know, your environment changes around you. You just want to make sure that you're kind of keeping up with that, so that the printer is being able to perform at its absolute best. So that is definitely something to consider there. Another thing that you can definitely have, like if you're in the wintertime, obviously your windows are going to be shut, right? Because you're going to want to keep the heat in. If you're running the heater, it's really cold, or you just don't want to let the cold in from the outside. Now, in the summertime or even in the springtime, usually, the windows can definitely be open because you want to let that nice breeze in. You want to let the nice outside air in, and it feels good outside. So you want to bring that inside. Now, those drafts that come in through the windows can actually very much so affect your print. So if you're having issues with bed adhesion or with layer adhesion, or things are just not looking right with the print itself, it could be because these drafts that are coming in through the windows, if you have your printer set up next to or near a window, those drafts could be coming in and they could be affecting the cooling on your part, especially for something that needs some very particular cooling like TPU or the higher engineering filaments like ASA, ABS. If you don't have a fully enclosed printer and you're trying to print these with a window or a draft, even a draft from the air conditioning, if you have the vent pointed right at your printer, that's actually a problem that I had when I was first starting out. I had printers just in my bedroom, and I got a second one and put it in a spot that I didn't know was right in line with the air vent. And I would leave for work and come back, and there would be tons of problems. It wouldn't stick to the bed. The layer adhesion wouldn't stick to itself. And I eventually figured out that, hey, when the air conditioning's on, it was the middle of summer, so the air conditioning is running all the time pretty much in Southern California. I realized that, hey, the vent is blowing air right on my 3D printer. And so that is probably the problem. I moved it and it started working a lot better after that. So that is definitely something to consider is, the air conditioning, the overall, if you're letting a draft in, if you're opening a window, but just the overall outside factors, and just it kind of goes with my overall topic of this episode is that 3D printing is not static. As things change around your 3D printer is also going to change. So that is definitely something to consider, the outside weather, how that could be affecting the air or, just the environment around your 3D printer, and how that could definitely cause some issues. Even if you're running a file that has been ran a bunch of times before successfully, it doesn't mean it's going to keep running successfully. You got to be able to kind of keep in control the elements around it to give it the best possible chance of succeeding, And another thing that I definitely wanted to talk about is the filament changes, because this happens usually without us even knowing. You could be ordering what you think is the same exact filament, when in reality the filament brand itself changed the recipe ever so slightly, whatever they use to whatever kind of plastic they're using, whatever additives they're using, to maybe they're using a different kind of dye for their color, or maybe they're using just a different kind of plastic overall. Maybe they tweak their formula just a little bit in terms of ratios of some plastic and another plastic. I don't know too much what goes on in these filament manufacturers, but I do definitely know that it happens from time to time. The ingredients to a certain filament gets changed, and even though on the box and on the listing, on the store listing, the product listing, it says it's the same exact thing, the fact of the matter is it's not. So, if you notice something, especially with the filament itself, that doesn't look like it's absorbing a ton of moisture, it just looks like something's just looking a little bit off, you might want to run your filament calibration tests again, because, that's not something that the filament company is going to typically announce. They're not going to say on the box, like, oh, we got a brand new recipe over here, we're trying this out. Chances are they're not going to do that. So that is something that you can definitely assume if you're having some of these issues, is that the filament brand, they can change things from right under your nose and not let you know about it. So that's definitely something to consider when you're doing that. And yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody is kind of aware of that, because it snuck up on me once or twice and I didn't really realize it was the case. And now that I'm kind of aware of it, I feel like I'm a little bit more known. And that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to make, 3D printers, people who are 3D printing, more aware of just the everyday use cases and issues that can come along in 3D printing, and give everybody the best chance to succeed with 3D printing. So this next one is actually probably one of the biggest factors for the reason if you are running a file over and over again and then it's suddenly not working like it used to. One of the biggest things is going to be wear and tear on the printer. As we all know, if we have had our 3D printers for any length of time, the parts on the 3D printer, they're not meant to last forever. They are consumable parts. They will need to be replaced eventually. So after a couple thousand hours on your 3D printer, if you notice things are not turning out as well as they used to in terms of quality, or just overall you're having some issues, chances are it might be time to replace some parts, whether it be the hot end, whether it be, just some general maintenance if you're not doing that, which you should be doing that. I have a whole episode on it. Whether it's, the belts are wearing out, some bearings are getting loose, maybe some stepper motors are burning out if you're really using it a ton. But just, that's definitely something that you want to check out, is that these 3D printers, they are not built to last forever. They are built to have consumable parts so that you keep coming back to them and you keep purchasing parts over and over and over again. But nonetheless, you will need to replace some parts on your 3D printer at some point in time. That is just the fact of the matter. And, most of the time it's going to be nozzles or hot ends, especially nozzles. I keep a bunch of nozzles on hand because those get replaced decently often for me, just because the prints I'm running, they can kind of fail. I'm running some high risk prints, and so there's definitely a chance where the nozzle can bump into the part itself or can scrape along the part, and that can definitely make them wear out faster than usual. But I always make sure to have a bunch of nozzles and hot ends on me so that I can switch them out really quickly, especially because most of my printers are Bambu printers, so I have like 5-10 nozzles always on hand just for me. So that is definitely something that you want to look at. The PTFE tube as well. The worn rollers on the rails. You definitely want to make sure that just overall, if your prints are not looking as good as they used to, it might be time to replace some parts. And as unfortunate as that is from a buyer's perspective, obviously we would want to buy something that lasts forever. The chances are just the fact of the matter is, after a couple thousand hours with your 3D printer, the parts just aren't going to be the same. They're going to wear out, and they're going to need to be replaced. Now, most of the time, the parts that need to be replaced are fairly easy to replace, and there are definitely plenty of videos online that you can access and you can learn from. And also, I like replacing parts because it helps me know the inner workings of my 3D printer and just makes me feel like I know it a little bit better. So it's just making it so that I can better diagnose problems later on. So that is definitely probably the biggest thing that I wanted to hammer home with this episode, is that if you have a file that is not looking as good as it used to, chances are, especially if you have a couple thousand hours on your printer, it might be time to replace some parts. And that's just kind of how it goes. So another thing that I wanted to kind of mention, and this will be probably the last thing that we talk about, is the conditions of the print bed. If you're having layer adhesion problems and you've tried, auto adjusting, you've tried this, that, the other, print settings, you've tweaked all the settings and it's still not adhering your print bed, chances are your print bed can definitely wear out. That's one of those consumable parts that might need to be replaced from time to time. I know if I've had to buy a few new print beds here and there just because the old ones are wearing out and they're not sticking as good as they used to. Sometimes they usually just need a quick clean. I know I got a comment on a couple episodes that says Bambu Labs does not recommend isopropyl alcohol for cleaning their print beds. I use isopropyl alcohol. It's just better at cleaning off the fingerprints and the oil for me. They say to use soap or detergent. I've used both. Both work out just fine. I like isopropyl alcohol because it's a little bit cleaner of a process rather than getting the whole thing wet and rubbing it down with soap. I just give it a quick wipe down with the alcohol, and I haven't noticed any kind of degradation of it sticking when I use the isopropyl alcohol. So I keep using that. You use it at your own risk. I know Bambu Lab specifically mentions that you shouldn't use that and you should use soap and water, but that is what I use. So just my opinion, it seems fine to me. But if you want to use soap and water, that is absolutely just as good, if not better, than the alcohol. So definitely something to consider there. But sometimes it just needs a quick wipe down and everything will be good to go. Sometimes you need to replace it. But just overall, your print bed is probably one of the biggest things when it comes to 3D printing, is that you have it as in good of a condition as you can to make sure that you have the best chance at having successful prints. But yeah, with that being said, that's kind of all I had for you guys today. I hope you guys were able to kind of learn something and realize that even though if you're running a file that has worked well in the past, chances are, whether it's due to seasonal environmental changes, print parts that need to be replaced, things breaking down, etc., etc. If your filament brand decides to change the recipe for no reason and they didn't notify you about it or they didn't notify the public about it, just these things that you can check to kind of get your printer back to where it was. And that's what we want. It's just 3D printers. We want them to just work. We want them to be churning out parts consistently. And, these are some of the issues that might be preventing that from happening. So that's what I want to do, is put you in the know of these problems so that you can have the best chance of getting your 3D printer to work reliably. I just wanted to mention again that the 3D Printing Basics Instagram is a link down in the show notes below. If you check that out and follow it, when we get to 1,000 followers, we are going to be giving away a 3D printer to one of my followers. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate all the support. We just did an exclusive monthly bonus episode that only the members of the Patreon can listen to. So if you're interested in getting access to those episodes, please head over there. There's a link in the show notes. But thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time.